Thanks, Jen. Okay, just warning this room that we would love this to be interactive. So get your participation instincts honed. I'm going to introduce two of my colleagues, and I will also disclose that I am also a lawyer. I'm not really a practicing lawyer anymore, but I come at this with the lens of both legal risks, which I think is absolutely fascinating in this space, but also what we aim the session to be is very, very practical. We've got some amazing speakers today that will tell you on the front lines what's actually happening. Last session, we talked about some existential risk. We wrapped with sort of people getting stupider, which I thought was hilarious, but it's totally a risk. Totalitarian regimes with, all the information about their citizens' activities online. I think we're going to be more around industry, what's happening in industry, and I would use this room to start propagating about what things industry leaders should be focused on, because I think this is the amazing juxtaposition with Harvard and a firm like McKinsey. I'll invite up Gabriel and Aval. Gabriel, want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'll be happy to. So very nice to meet you. I'm a partner at McKinsey, part of the Quantum Black, which is an AI division of McKinsey. I'm actually a data scientist by training. I have a PhD in data science, and I work with clients across many verticals to build software that is powered by AI, but also the responsible AI framework. I work closely with Liz to embed it both from a governance perspective, but also from a software build perspective. So the controls, the application, and the way the data is being used. So very happy to share with you some of the use cases that we've been working on and the experience of implementing this in real life.
Hi everyone, I'm Aval. I'm a consultant at McKinsey's New York office. I do most of my work in our AI Trust and AI for Social Good Practice, focusing on embedding ethical practices while using AI systems and also leveraging AI for societal benefit. So very excited to be here and join this discussion.
Hey, friends. Okay, what are we doing with our time? We've got 3 modules today, and we've broken it up. The first module will be AI ethics and governance. So who thinks AI is exciting? Raise your hand. Practicing participation. All right, I think it's very exciting. Who thinks the word governance is exciting? Okay. I was expecting like this. Okay. Governance can be boring. Governance can be very exciting. It just depends on your lens. But I think what we are trying to do here is it's not really making governance exciting. It's just addressing its need and then talking about practically how does it happen. I think it's so easy to talk about the risks of AI and how the spiral can go. It's just, I've always wanted to be incredibly practical with it. Yes, of course there are risks, but AI is AI, it's here, it's already here. So what then? Okay, what should we do? And so this is going to be some practical application. Second session will be around scalable design. So within an organization itself, as your AI scales, so must your solutions. There was an incredible article that is worth Googling. It's like 1.5 years, 2 years old now, but Eric Schmidt wrote something for the journal about how solutions for AI risk has to be sort of head-to-head with AI innovation writ large. And that's true. You need like a market solutions to the risk piece of this because altruism only carries you so far. You need things like companies that are incented to create solution tools that people will buy and use. So how do you design for your organization a set of controls that will actually scale with your innovation? And then the third session, we're talking about my favorite topic, which is there's a very big risk in not using AI. There's risks for us as professionals, there's risks for organizations, and we have to sort of address that and say, what does it mean given AI is sort of the differentiator for our careers, for our organizations? What then? What does plus look like? And we've got 3 amazing speakers. We've got Christin McMeley, who's the Senior Vice President and Chief Privacy Officer at Comcast. She's fascinating because there are so many brands under the Comcast umbrella, and she is in charge of wrangling the approaches to AI and privacy data governance across all 3. So we'll have some very practical Q&A with Christin. For our second session, we've got Gabriel, and Gabriel and I work closely together, so I know who he serves. We can't mention our clients' names, so we're going to mention companies today. We are not saying when we mention these companies that they are McKinsey clients or not McKinsey clients. We are just mentioning companies. But I know that Gabriel's work is very cutting edge. I've worked with him closely in some of the nation's leading organizations. And so you're going to get some practical case studies from Gabriel from Aval. And we've helped some organizations work through some of this to how to get up and running. The last session, we've got Pat Gelsinger, who was the former CEO of Intel and VMware. He is now the chairman of the board at a company called Glue. The 3 pillars for Glue are tech, trust, and faith. It's in the faith community. Pat is a committed Christian. He is a brilliant, brilliant engineer. and he's going to talk about sort of the concept of trust and the need to stay, sort of committed to trust while you're committed to rapid fire innovation. And he's got a great phrase, which is fix it fast, which is different than don't incur risk, right? It's like fix it fast implies there's something broken. So he'll dive really into it. I find all three of the speakers brilliant, and I'm so grateful to Apple for putting these materials together. So we're going to get started. There's 2 breaks, just so you can plan your liquid consumption. There's 2 breaks. We're going to do the first module, take a 5-7 minute break, come back, second, same break, and then third. And again, you're part of this, so thank you for participating. So we design governance, but we call it trust, because governance, again, people have different reactions to the word, but trust is something that pretty much people can argue is, who's going to object to trust. We're going to dive into our first module. What are the ethical imperatives of AI? This is subjective, obviously. Like it's subjective based on what country you're in, it's subjective based on your lens. But the importance of proactive governance, irrespective of regulatory frameworks. We don't have a US federal AI regulation. We're probably not going to anytime soon. So what do? What do organizations do? Okay, so we've got this chart basically shows where we are with the democratization of AI. What is causing this? Compute power is very cheap, relatively speaking. Data is ubiquitous, and we've got better algorithms. So every time there's a new release, we're looking at, compute power increases, reasoning layered over this, everything is rapid fire pace, increasing, and you all have it on your phones. You have it on your desktops. You can just go in and access these incredibly powerful LLMs and get, deep research going. You got 8 minutes. Well, they can turn around something that a PhD would take weeks or maybe months to do. That's phenomenal. And we've got this now everywhere, and it's sobering. I'm not going to walk through all of these risks, but I will give you this, and I use it all the time. So if you heard me speak before, forgive me. But I love the phrase aviation checklist, because we can all intuit, if we're going to fly, please, will someone go through a list of checks to see, are things sealed? Are things calibrated? Are the parts, within their expiration date? And I think we can all say that we desperately want that to happen. So when you think about AI risks in an organization, this list is not some lawyer typing, oh, I think there's this risk, that risk, and the other risk. This list comes because you've talked to lawyers, cyber people, marketing folks, the business leads, the use case prioritization team, whoever that is. You've talked to all of these, and I will tell you that this risk, macroprudential, was added to our list on a conversation with Chairman Gensler, Gary Gensler, former SEC chairman, saying, hey, what about market instability? What about this interaction with all of the institutions? So we've been building this out at McKinsey to say, you can do your own checklist for each organization, but you better have a list. And when you think about the list, when you think about the use cases, are you running them through this list? Are you thinking about second and third order implications for instance, lack of explainability and accountability? If you're in insurance and you've got lack of explainability and you're using an underwriting model that's powered by AI, you are in very big trouble with the insurance regulators. So, IP infringement, if you are in marketing and you're generating like the best new commercial or the best new print ad, and you have not thought about training data and IP rights, and you're looking at lawsuits. So I've given you sort of 2 legal, but thinking about third-party risks and the macroprudential risks, leaders at these companies, and I believe Pat will get into this, will talk about what does your company going to be known for, and what are you triggering in the world? Because I think AI use is not bound by the 4 corners of your organization. AI use for every organization expands to all of their consumers, people watching, sort of the world at large. It's a very large base. So this risk list becomes more important than sort of just parade of horribles. I think when we think about this, and I'm going to call on Apple in a minute to give her time to prep, we look at sort of things, what can go wrong? And you have to do this. You have to think, it's like troubleshooting your home. Does anyone have proximity to like a 2-year-old? Yeah, okay, good. Agree on this. Or you've seen one, right? Like we've all been one, right? You've seen 2-year-olds, right? I think childproofing the house. We can all say, okay, you put the hooks on the doors, you rubber on the corners. And I think when I think about 2-year-olds, I think about high mobility and very low self-governance. Like they just go. And so I think thinking through like what are risks that you might, you've intuited that I've likened AI to 2-year-olds, which is I think is true. So you're looking at like operationally what can happen, reputationally what can happen, and legal what can happen. And I'll turn this to Abel to say, what can go wrong with AI? And then I'm gonna ask you guys, so give you time to think about. Abel, what are ways that AI can go wrong?
Yeah, thanks, Liz. I mean, there are many ways. We just saw a bunch of categories there, but I think in addition to the examples we have here, I'd like to call out 2 more that I recently have been reading about. The first one was, in light of the recent elections, there was a lot of inaccurate AI outputs being used, even these sort of deep fakes. They were essentially propagating misinformation about the election. So one example that comes to mind is someone created a Taylor Swift deep fake of her endorsing Donald Trump before she had publicly made any announcement.
I thought you did endorse him.
So, this is obviously risky because you're actually, at this point, putting election integrity at stake and, in turn, essentially threatening our democracy. So really critical, the ways in which we're seeing AI risk manifest in the real world. Another example that I read was a Chevrolet dealership in California was using a ChatGPT-powered chat box on their website, and a very savvy user was actually able to get the chat box to commit to selling them a $75,000 car for $1, and say that this is legally binding. And the organization actually released a statement saying that this just highlights the need to have a human in the loop to actually verify all AI outputs and make sure we're not spreading misinformation. That's, I think, 2 examples that come to mind of how AI risk can really manifest in the real world.
Yeah, and I would say to you all, what are surprising areas where AI now exists that you didn't think? Like, have you learned recently that they use AI to do X, Y, or Z? I'll start you off because I have a 15-year-old son in sophomore, and I was looking up like unexpected AI, and I love this phrase, smart cows. Smart cows. Smart cows are cows with collars that assess their health, their activity, all sorts of, even like when they're ready for like a breeding cycle. But I think smart cows is a funny turn on smart cars. But it's cow collars. That was unexpected for me. Of course, I can think of asset like AI tracking assets in mining because that just feels like something our clients would do. But I didn't think about cows. How about you? What's an unexpected use of AI? I come from law school, so I also proud enough of this one. Yes.
Yeah, I recently read that in Iran they're using AI to track women who are not wearing the hijab and find them.
Wonderful example. Wow. Yes, good to know. And that goes to the catastrophic, the sort of the closing comments of last session, where you just say like, did I like something? Like I like Taylor Swift on multiple media. Like, could that get tracked and attributed back to me? Great example, and chilling one that will stay in my head. Others? Yeah.
Generic consequence, which is I've been studying this for a decade and I've been using it for a long time.
Using AI.
And it's raised my concern for every source of information, simply because I don't know where the source has gotten its information. Right. So I now have a healthy doubt about everything I hear.
Mm-hmm. I love that, and it reminds me of food supply chains and how tainted they can get, and how you just want to know what farm did it come from and who grew it and what pesticides did they use, and like the farm to table that we all love. It's because it wasn't flown in from who knows where, added, and like it's still shelf worthy 18 months after they made it. What? How? That's alarming. So yeah, I think that's data provenance, data sourcing, data quality, health, all that stuff. Yes, of course, that's the health that feeds the AI that we use all the time. Very amazing. Well, I think it's important to think about, I guess I would just say AI is pretty much everywhere. I mean, that's an overstep, but it is pretty much everywhere. So I think we should just say, 1, we know that there are problems. 2, we know that everything is sort of biased. So I don't mean to put us in a defensive posture, but I do mean to say, to my gentleman friend's point, is that we should assume that the food we're eating is potentially tainted. And if we want to stay healthy, we should have that very healthy sort of, I don't know, it's like wanting to go check what's in there, the ingredients there are. And I think thinking across the organization, just thinking that things can go wrong, so you really do want to assume that they'll go wrong and then go from there. Okay, regulation. I will do another poll. Who, and I'm raising my hand, who thought we would have regulation by now on AI? Yeah. Who hoped we would have regulation by now on AI? Yeah, we probably won't. And the EU just got a huge public shaming, in Germany especially, for slowing down its innovation because some of the national discourse around regulation has turned to, if you regulate, you're crushing your innovators and you're killing any hopes they have to be, sort of economically and politically successful. That's tricky. So what do we say? We're saying that, every regulation that comes along at now, inherently is going to be playing catch up. So yes, there are starts. Yes, there's sort of inroads that there are things that are getting done and undone. But for organizations that we counsel, you can't rely on regulation to pin your governance to. It's just unstable, often it's not interoperable, and there are some data privacy things that you have to comply with, but you basically have to work backwards from something else. And I'm going to ask Gabriel, when you counsel, Gabriel, your clients, and they're saying, well, why do we have to do this? What do you say?
Well, so a lot of times, we work with financial institutions that they initially are more interested in compliance, right? So they kind of think about regulation, how they should respond to that, how should they prepare their reports. But now, because the regulation is kind of scaling back, at least in the US, right? In Europe, it's actually moving in the other direction, as you know. What we see now is becoming more self-regulation. So we work with a lot of organizations that are thinking about responsible AI, trustworthy AI, simply from a operations perspective, right? So they're aware of the risks. For example, some of the organizations that I work with, they made tools available to their employees, like ChatGPT or GitHub Copilot, right, or other tools. So quickly they realized that there are a lot of risks regarding IP, regarding sharing information that is sensitive. So they basically are coming to the realization that they need to put their own guardrails in place and not wait for regulation. And they start developing both, and we'll cover this in the other session, they start covering both principles and governance, but also they're building tools, and also they're building tools for decision that is made based on AI. So it's interesting to see that a lot of the organizations are not just reactive now, they're being proactive because they realize the risk.
And I'm going to way oversimplify this, but you'll get what I mean. When boards ask their C-suite what they're doing with AI, this is oversimplified, but they're like, why aren't we using AI? Why are we so risky on AI? And they do this, and different committees kind of focus on this, but you have to answer this, like the leadership has to answer. They have to have good, provocative, revenue-generating use cases, and they have to have de-risk all these things if you want to keep your job. So that's a board demand. And at the same time, again, speaking over generally, and I'm not including Pat, who's absolutely brilliant, boards often don't know about AI. So they're saying things that, like, they're just looking for sort of signals. And I would say the same thing for the regulators. They're looking for signals that things are on track, but the details are really down to data scientists, people with PhDs in data science, like Gabriel. So there's that sort of that mismatch. Okay, Abel. McKinsey does a lot of client service, of course, but we also do research, and we do research across our clients, but we do sort of general research. And we have been finding a lot about responsible AI, so I'm going to pass it to Abel to share our research.
Yeah, so our company, McKinsey, has done and conducted a study on the state of AI, as we call it, where we essentially surveyed over 1,300 participants across different industries and at all levels of the organization.
Excuse me, could you use a microphone?
Let's see if this works. Does this work?
Is that better? Yeah. So I was talking about our state of the AI survey that we conduct every year. We surveyed over 1,300 participants across industries and at all levels of the organization and asked them questions about their AI use. And I'd like to share 3 really interesting findings from the study. So the first one was AI use is like drastically increasing. After over 6 or 7 years of essentially no significant growth in AI use over the past year or so, it's essentially doubled. And even people and enterprises who were already using AI are now suggesting they're using it in more than one business function or unit. So exponentially, we're seeing a lot of growth in the space. The second one is as AI adoption and AI use increases, the risks that AI causes are also increasing, and inaccuracy is the number one most experienced or reported risk that organizations are dealing with and actively trying to mitigate. About a quarter of our respondents reported already seeing some kind of negative consequence due to inaccurate AI outputs. And the third finding is about how these AI capabilities are actually being deployed. So we kind of talk about them in terms of three archetypes of AI adoption. The first one, which is probably the most common, about 50% of our respondents fall in this bucket, is essentially takers of AI that are using off-the-shelf, readily available tools like Gemini, ChatGPT for their work. The second group are the makers of AI. So we think of the big tech players who are actually building their own solutions and LLMs. And the final category are sort of the shapers that use these solutions but fine-tune them or customize them based on their own data and systems. And the risk profile also varies based on which category you fall into. So you probably have more control as a maker because you know what guardrails to put in place and at each level, versus when you're just taking an off-the-shelf solution, you don't really know the inner workings of the model. And so you're sort of subject to a lot of uncertainty and consequently a lot of risk as a result of that.
Thanks, Alan. I've seen, oh yeah, please.
Thank you very much. I'm curious, in your research, how do you think about AI, pre-Gen AI? And I see your headline says Gen AI is increasingly leveraged. So there are different things going on there. And are you seeing in your research or with your client work that even those companies who have some sort of more robust AI governance, that the Gen AI is not able to be addressed appropriately, or how do you think about that?
Such a good question.
Yeah.
Gabriel.
Maybe I can address I can take the second question, right? So we are actually working now with a client on updating their AI governance. So they do have an AI governance in place. And they are they kind of wanted to know what are the new elements that Gen AI is bringing in, right? So what are the novel risks that Gen AI is bringing? So we start mapping out what is the taxonomy of risks from Gen AI versus the traditional AI, right? So some of the new elements are obvious, right? Like hallucinations, right? So that was not there. But you have also other issues regarding the way the models are being built. So Gen AI, for example, it's much more like a software than a model. So if you think from a model governance perspective, when you have a AI model, you typically reevaluate the model, let's say every quarter, right? So you kind of look at the data refresh, you're looking at the parameters, you have a model drift at that point, you need to rectify it, right? When you have a Gen AI tool that is like a software, it's running real time, right? So then it brings a new question about model risk management. So how do you check for a model that is running real time? Also, another important element, which is very different than traditional AI, is that now you have human in the loop, right? So as you're putting guardrails on Gen AI applications, you cannot just let them run, right? So first, you need to have some procedures on how you do it. Two, you need to have humans checking to make sure that certain things are being verified, right? So for example, when you're building a RAG application, you need to make sure that the data that is going in is being sanitized, right? So there's different techniques in doing that. But it's also as the Gen AI is generating content, like for example, chatbot, right? It's generating responses. There's a risk that the language that is being generated has not been approved by somebody, right? Especially in the legal profession. Imagine a chatbot giving legal advice, right? So where every single word is extremely important, right? And semantics actually do have different legal connotation. So there are different techniques. We can talk more when we get to the second section, but you need to have these kind of three components: the procedures, the human in the loop component, and the automated components like a LLM as a judge working in tandem, right? So kind of synchronize to make sure that you have the right guardrails, but the right monitoring of those models. So this delta that is coming from Gen AI versus AI is important. And a lot of the organizations that are working on this, they're updating their internal procedures to kind of cope with these new types of risks.
And one of the big, shall I use the microphone or is my voice pretty high? One one of the big things on human in the loop is which human.
Yeah.
Because that's something that people bandy about, like human in the loop. But getting the right human who knows what to do in the loop, and they'll own it every time, and they know what to go look for, that's really tricky within an organization. So organizations are well-meaning. I mean, they don't need to leave out fairness. But I have counseled many organizations, marketing organizations, that have incredible brands that we all buy, and they just think fairness, legal's handling it. Legal's not handling it. They think marketing's handling it. Marketing's like, someone's handling it. No one's handling it. So that happens within organizations. They just don't have that risk register and the ownership. We'll get into that in how you create these systems for session 2. Okay, so why would you do this? See, what are we talking about when we say governance? We're going to get to the whys. What do we mean? We're saying, since ethics and values are subjective inherently, right? What is ethical in California, where I come from? I don't know, it looks pretty different in Connecticut, where I live now. Certainly where we live in the US, it's going to look different from, Saudi Arabia. Every region has its own vision of what ethical is. And you raised the great point around like what use cases they use for different tracking of citizens. So what we're thinking when we talk about organizations, we're talking about safe, trustworthy, and ethical, which has to be defined contextually. What's the organization? What's the jurisdiction? What are the use cases? Who are its customers? So that's something that is not like you can pull it off the shelf. I mean, there are universal principles, and you can, and we'll get to those in session 3 about like what makes humans flourish, and we can argue, we can all say that trust is probably important, but last second. But what we're saying here is we're trying to harness the power of AI, because it's going to be everywhere, in alignment with strategic objectives. What are you trying to do as a business? What are you trying to do as a country? What are you trying to do with AI? And risk appetite. How risky do you want to be? I will tell you that OpenAI is pretty darn risky. But what you may get at Procter & Gamble, not as. Or you may get, Freddie Mac. They don't want to mess around with these things. It just depends on the organization itself. So when we counsel the clients, it's not off the shelf. It's like tailored to what they're trying to do. And companies, to your question around AI versus Gen AI, everyone's been dealing with AI for a long time. Arguably, everyone already has governance, right? They should. But what is it now? It's something new where we're saying, how do you up-level all of these things within an organization to make it fit for purpose for the new ubiquity and types of AI that we've got? And why governance? Because, we're going to get into this, you can make more money if you have good governance. We back this up with research. I know we're not all capitalists, and making money is not the chief aim of the world. I would say human flourishing is probably better than making money. But we would also say, if you're looking for incentives beyond altruism, the fact that you can do better and deliver more value to your shareholders, which is the purpose of a Delaware corporation, which most are, then you can do this with better governance. And we can talk about causality and correlation in a second. But it is true, better AI governance tracks with better economic performance. And why now? I will just say, we all know why, right? It's everywhere. Okay, so some research on how do you create value creation. Interestingly, in the private equity and VC worlds, a year or two ago, they landed on something that I already believed in, but I think is great. If they're trying to create alpha, they're trying to create value, in these companies, you can do better at doing this if you have some table stakes levels of governance. So there's a huge handful of VC and PE firms that signed up to Responsible Innovation Lab's conditions for AI governance, because it just meant you're looking after something as in, like, if the company is an asset and the data is asset, the AI you use is generating value, protect it. It's not even AI governance, it's just like quality assurance of your AI. So we ran some low key, it's not even huge research, but basically just tracking those that are leaders in AI governance, and those are companies that have codified policies for data and core values. They've responded that they are confident that employees will follow those data and AI policies. That means they know what they are, they know what to do. They've incorporated these policies in a mission statement, and they've got basically 50% of the best practices for data privacy, AI, and cybersecurity. If they have these, they are 1.7 times more likely to see revenue growth rates of greater than 10%. Yes, it's possible that they are just, it's correlated because they're just more efficient as a company. They're using AI more. There's all sorts of reasons. But it is what it is. Those who are governing AI have something going on within their organization that tracks to better economic performance. And I think that when the VC and PE firms, they do not waste their time, they do not waste their effort or energy. And if they're saying it's part of alpha, great, I believe them because they are incented. So I guess I know that sounds very cynical. If you don't like that world, fine, lots of people don't. I just look at it as one more data point as like worth doing, because I think sometimes the argument that you should do something gets really old because like, someone will say, well, why? Why should I do it? So I've moved, or I'd like to, again, and I think where we're seeing the stock price, this will just show you the same point that I just made. I'm going to get to Christin, so I'm going to skip over this. But when we say, what are we going to actually ask about AI governance? I think we are looking at what the leaders are, from a very zoomed out perspective, asking. What are they asking? And I would argue, what are boards asking? Because that's what the leadership of a company really is. They're not always focused on the boards. They're focused on boards and customers and their own peers and all this stuff. But if you're thinking about sort of broad level questions, let's all put our CEO hats on. We're CEOs. How will AI affect our industry? Pick your industry in your mind, and company in the short and longer term. I've done that many times, and if we're all CEOs right now, we can all do this on ChatGPT ourselves. Like we can search and look and extrapolate, but then you have to ask something that you wouldn't want to put in ChatGPT because you don't want to put in your confidential information. Are we balancing value creation with adequate risk management? That's a tricky equation. That is something where you want to understand how risky you're willing to go as an organization and how much value you want from AI. Move fast and break things can make you a lot of money. And if you don't care about fines and reputational risk, and some tech companies do not, because they have line item in their budget for basically like screwing up costs, then you have a lot more leeway to make more money. But you have to ask, what is our particular equation here? How should we organize for generative AI? This goes to Gabriel's point, and the question was asked. Does anyone know how to do this within the organization? Do we have lawyers that know what fairness is like in AI, what IP ownership concerns can be in Gen AI? And I would say a lot of organizations do not yet have this talent. So what are we going to do? It's not even just organize. It's what's our talent strategy on up-leveling everyone? And I think everyone's in a big learning curve right now. And the necessary capabilities, do you have the tools? Do you have a scalable model? This will segue us into session 2. I want to make sure that we get Christin. And do we have Christin, Jennifer?
You do.
Okay. All right. Four pillars that Christin, I'm sure, has already addressed within her organization. But conceptually, to get after this, we'll close with this. You want a strategy. It's just a plan. Like, what are you going to actually do? What's the vision? What are your principles? What are you following? And then you want an operating model. If you have principles, how do you operationalize them? Who's going to do what? And how do they work together? Risk measurement and monitoring. When you set up things that are helpful for risk management, like red teaming, like model risk management, like architectural review boards, do they work? Because you could say, oh, I did all the aviation checklist. If it's someone who doesn't know how to run an airplane, you don't want to fly in that plane. So like whoever's in this, sort of operational model has to have the skills to recognize when it's ineffective, or has the skills to say we have to, sort of up-level this. And the enablers themselves, you're looking at basically how do you tools you're bringing in, what's the change management, because this is brand new and people are like, not my thing, I don't own it. And so you have people like Christin McMeley who is going. And so we have people like Christin McMeley who's going to join us. Hi, Christin, who is the person standing on the wall to make sure that all of these things are happening. So let me, Christin, I've already introduced you in the room, but let me let you introduce yourself and welcome to the classroom. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, everybody. I'm joining you from London and our NBCU offices, thus the universal poster of Jaws behind me.
It's fitting.
Yes, early AI? No, not really. Anyway, nice to meet all of you. I am the Chief Privacy and Data Strategy Officer at Comcast. My world started with privacy, which of course relies on information governance and ties closely with cybersecurity. And as many companies have done, privacy is because of the broad stakeholder alignment that's needed in that area and all of the different areas that that discipline touches. AI had been added onto my plate. And I used to be with the cable organization for the last 6 years within Comcast, and about 6 months ago moved into the corporate world, and I'm working to align all of our businesses on aforesaid topics. So happy to be here today.
And that is not an easy thing to do across differently incented organizational units within the umbrella. Okay, Christin, we've got a list of questions here up in the screen, and I'm going to ask you them, but also we're going to be able to invite the audience who are asking amazing questions to jump in here. So I will start with the first question, which is, how do you define trust? People have different definitions of what it means. How do you measure it? How do you scale it? And how should you operationalize it within an organization? How do you define it?
That is a good question. I think a lot of companies, including our own, is trying to think about that. We're trying to think about that. I think that one of the things, it's different, right? It's different depending on what AI you're using, what your business is, the products and services you're talking about. So when I think about trust, and Liz, we didn't really prepare or do a dry run of these questions. So when I think about trust in AI, right now I'm coming at it from the perspective of consumers and regulators and our own business people, and how do you trust the models and the systems? And I think if you think about things like cars, for example, and you're using AI in cars, I think there's a primary concern with respect to safety and security. And how are you testing your models? How are you what data is leading in? How much test time is there before you're launching this? What do trials look like? If you're looking at things like AI in pricing algorithms, for example, which is a topic that just came up in some legislation today that we were talking about, some proposed legislation.
And how would AI in pricing work? So like surge pricing, differential pricing?
Differential pricing, I mean, lots of different ways, but if you're either doing search pricing where I'm going onto an internet and then I'm getting results back, and do I know that it's AI giving me those results? Am I getting the same pricing that somebody, that my neighbor is getting, or that somebody across town is getting? What is factoring into the price that's being offered to me, or the pricing that companies are putting together for their own marketing and advertising in the way that they're targeting? So it can either come from the user searching, the consumer searching, or from the business, how it's setting and creating models and then sending out their marketing and advertising materials. And when we look at that type of AI, I think the concern is fairness, right? And transparency. If you look at something else that is very prevalent in our world with respect to digital assistants, chatbots, or other industries that are doing like character bots, for example. Transparency. Do people understand that they're interacting with AI? There's explainability depending on certain models. Do you have, is it right for the consumer? Should they know what information is going into the models or the types of information that's going into the models? These are all things that are popping up in different entities. AI principles that you're seeing published, it's coming up in legislation. And I think those are kind of the foundational pieces. And Liz, I missed your whole presentation, so I don't know.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you're touching on something we talked about, which is if you're trying to operationalize principles, and principles and ethics are subjective, you would want to say to yourself, are we a company that wants to do differential pricing? Like, say I'm Patagonia. Do I care if a fleece jacket gets advertised to Christin at one price and Aval at another price and you at another price? Do we care about this? Do we care as a company? If you are an insurance company, do you care that one zip code gets this offer and another gets that offer? I really think that you'd care. So this understanding that this could be a thing that you would need to ask your leadership, how do you feel about our strategy with AI and what we're using and our risk appetite? We talked about this balance, and it's different per company. And I won't ask you what yours is, Christin, because I know it's private. But I guess what I would say, I would ask you is this. imagine there is someone in your organization, and I'm not saying you have it, but I'm guessing that you do, who has said, why do we need to do this? We don't have regulations. Why are we even messing around with this? What would you say?
I would say, au contraire, we do have regulations. And I have put together a chart of all of the laws and regulations that are currently in place. It's interesting. I mean, there are aspects of AI that have not been regulated, and that I think goes to the bias testing of algorithms, the transparency, the notices that you're giving to users of AI, requirements to test, for fairness. But there are a lot of laws today, and I don't know if you touched on enforcement actions, Liz, in the presentation.
We did not.
But you're already seeing regulators in the United States, like the Federal Trade Commission, the old Federal Trade Commission. Who knows where this goes right now? I will just preface everything with we're in a little bit of uncertainty about how this is all going to be viewed.
You could say that
again. You can imagine. Even if it's not the Federal Trade Commission, there are AGs in states who are going to be looking at enforcement. Colorado does have an AI law in place that are going to be enforcing things like the consumer protection laws, unfair and deceptive acts and practices. There's also requirements in the Fair Credit Reporting Act. That is a federal law. It has a private right of action, where if you are discriminating or if you're using consumer reporting data in a certain way to maybe offer those different prices or to accelerate debt collection, for example, it doesn't matter that you're using AI. And this has actually been the argument of a lot of advocates for not legislating. You'll hear voices who say we don't need AI legislation because we already have all of these laws that use what you have, enforce what's on the books already. So I think that is a valid point. There are some gaps, though, in the law with respect to what kind of notices do you need to provide? So you're working backwards from a very healthy array of laws that actually do apply. So to say there's no federal AI regulation is somewhat misleading in that AI is governed by a bunch of data privacy laws, the Fair Credit Reporting Act, there's housing and civil liberties laws that we have to follow. And you make a good point about lawsuits. There are AGs, state attorneys general, that are very, very bullish on this because it's a name maker. Well, for us, the conscience too. But also it's a name maker. And I think if they take a very strong stance on whatever it is, that's a big statement to make in the U.S. right now. So states attorneys general, plaintiffs attorneys, it's lucrative. This stuff is lucrative. So I think we're going to see, and I wonder if you agree, Christin, more lawsuits that ultimately would help guide a strategy on risk appetite too. I do. And I think it depends on the area. I mean, take autonomous cars. There's already been litigation there. There's been litigation, I think, in the healthcare, for differential pricing and enforcement actions and investigations into exactly what you mentioned before about the insurance coverage. So I do think that that's going to continue to proliferate.
Can we do a quick spot poll? If you patronize a company, pick one in your head, and they routinely charge you more because there's some attribute about you that is immutable to you, that you didn't choose, whether you chose it or not, there's some quality about you that makes them charge you more, who would vote with their feet and go to a different company, assuming it's commodity? Totally. Yeah. Can you capture this for McKinsey data shows the room? No,
think about a rideshare app. I mean, probably a lot of us have different apps on our phone, and we might go to one and we get a certain price, and then we go to another and we get a lower price, and you go back to the first one and you get an even lower price. I mean, it happens today, and I think we do walk with our feet.
I agree. All right, specific to your job and your company, Comcast has a lot of different entities, and I'll let you talk about them. How do you align all the stakeholders when they all have different incentives and P&Ls and like whatever their name makers are within the organization? What do you do to kind of align all of the enterprise?
We're working on it. We're working on it. We have literally 2 hours ago. This was the call that I was on with all of the companies. we have drafts of enterprise-wide principles. I think right now the various companies have their own. We're bringing it all together. And this is a board-level issue and a directive that we need to have an enterprise view of how we feel about AI, how we're going to use it in our company. And it is very different because we have a cable business, which I was very integral to for a long time, that uses AI for the things like marketing and advertising, or for routing calls. I mean, for many, many years, or through the voice remote, with respect to content and your preferences. That is aligned with NBCU on the preferences piece, but our NBCU entity has Universal Studios, as you can see behind me. And you might remember some of the writers' strikes. There are various agreements in place with respect to how they can, that was part of what got the writers back and the filmmakers back was, agreements on and over concerns about how AI was going to be used in the filmmaking with the actors, with, generating images through AI or drafting scripts through AI. And that's very different from our, some of our other businesses that are more B2B, security-focused businesses, where we're, providing security services by looking at anomalies and logs, but that's all AI and machine learning. It's just it's not generative AI. So that's the vast landscape of all of the cats that we're trying to herd. And I think at the highest level, we are all in agreement with respect to those things that we talked about, trust, because we need ourselves to be able to trust in the AI systems that we're using. If you think about Comcast as the largest ISP in the US and the internet service provider, sorry, I'm thinking you all know, but if you don't, and I say an acronym, please just ask. But we have to, for the reliability of our network, if we're using AI to continue to monitor and test that, we have to ourselves have faith in, and trust in that work and how it's being applied. We have to make sure that the information, if we are using AI to, even internally, if I'm using Copilot, for example, we can't just be putting all of our confidential information. Forget about whether it's personal information or our customers or our employees' information, but just our business sensitive information. How are we putting this information into these AI algorithms? Are they going into our own instance? Are they going to be used to feed other models outside of our business? So there's a lot of consideration paid to the security of our systems, the contractual requirements, how we evaluate. We don't really design a lot of our own AI. We are, and I don't, Liz, if you said this, I apologize. But if you think of AI in the world of deployers and developers, we are largely a deployer. We do develop some AI models, but we usually buy a lot of others. So it's, how do we trust the people that we're, or the vendors, the service providers that we're getting those AI systems from and licenses. So the companies can agree at the highest level. And then I think as long as we're doing that and we have a framework, which is what we're putting into place, how they adopt that framework, as long as it all aligns up and meets our core values as a company, that's going to be left to the individual companies to operationalize it.
Yeah, it really draws a bright line under the difficulty of your role and others like you. And I know you're an incredibly experienced lawyer and professional in this space. So trying to create something that is applicable to all of the entities and still protect the strategic objectives that are different across the entities is really tricky. I want to make sure that we have an awesome audience. I want to make sure that they get a chance to ask questions. And I will say that if you guys have suggestions, we literally, in the same way that regulators are asking industry, how do you think about it? If you in your research or your work have thoughts on how organizations should operationalize AI, here is a great venue to say, there's new data provenance standards, for instance, or pick your thing. But I'd love to open the floor up to questions, and I'll give them the microphone, Christin, if you don't mind, audience Q&A.
No, go ahead.
Who's a Comcast?
I'll answer what I can.
Maybe I have a question. I'm curious if you could speak about a really bad experience throughout your role with the use of AI, and what are the lessons learned or the lack of regulation of AI in governance? Can you describe something really bad happened and how you guys, how you react to that?
I have to say, I can't think, I'm knocking on wood because I can't think of one, because we have been so careful. And there's going to be a balance, right? Because Comcast as a company typically is not, we're not a leader in this space. Like, I am sure you could talk to Microsoft or any number of companies that you'll hear about that are more of the developers in this space. We are a deployer. We are we like to think of ourselves in this space as a fast follower versus a leader. We have learned a lot from the developers and, benchmarking, looking at their principles. They have a lot more sensitivity, a lot more high risk AI systems that we can then draw from. We're not doing crazy things with AI right now. Some of the examples I gave before, content recognition, for example. When I speak into the microphone and I order some content and then it says, you might like these things. So far, I haven't heard any complaints. I'm not going to name this company, but you could Google it. But there are considerations that I think companies do need to think about. There was a title of an article, how did this certain content company know that I was gay before I did? And they started watching all of the content that was being surfaced, and it was all LGBTQ type of programming. And so I think those are they're not risks that people are thinking about, or how does that look? And then how do you mitigate that? So if I have a shared television, for example, do I want to be able to turn those recommendations off because I don't want other people to, see the insights that this algorithm is gaining about me and how it is reflecting back? So I guess that's probably the closest thing. It's not my story to tell, but it's something that I've read about, and it certainly could have been something that we would have dealt with.
Christin, you remind me, my husband is a New York Times bestselling author. He's not that serious of a guy, but he's a writer and he reads serious things. And we share a Goodreads account and we share an Amazon account. So I take great delight in buying beach reads and review. It was phenomenal. And it's like Connor Grennan. I find it very funny. He finds it less funny. We have time for one more question.
Thank you very much, Christin. I have a meta question. Given the proliferation of AI, Gen AI, how do you think about using AI to monitor AI? And are there places where you would absolutely not go there because of the principles or the governing rules and the culture of your organization? And if you had a point of view, I'm curious. Thank you.
That's a very good question. And I think you will have AI. I mean, every time I think I have my hand, I was telling Liz this at some point recently, whenever I think I finally have my head around the thing, there's a new thing. And so now I'm spending a lot of time reading about and learning about agentic AI and how these AI systems are talking to each other and interacting with each other. And there are, right now, the question that you pose is interesting because it's not exactly what you're asking, but it could be. It could be used in this way. We have consumer facing AI programs where, these things are proliferating, where customers will, there's a world that is coming. And as a consumer, I can use an AI program to say, go find me the best internet service. And one of the things that we like to do when you get to Comcast and you have an agent, whether it is a digital assistant or a human being, is say, oh, can we offer you more services? Can we, would you like to bundle, you all know about the bundle. Would you like to bundle this with that? Or would you like to add something on? And, these systems that are coming in from the consumer side are only looking for the best price. And so ultimately, it really ultimately could be problematic for a lot of businesses that do this. I mean, think about the recommendations when I go shopping that I get from Amazon or Nordstrom. You'll see something. It's that point of purchase sale, right? And if a consumer is using a bot to shop for them, you're going to miss out on those point of purchase sales. So back to your point about an AI system checking another AI system or algorithms checking algorithms, I think the danger there is it's only going to look for what you program it to look for. And as humans, that is one of our principles, is we want to have humans in the loop. How do you audit that? How do you check all of the AI to make sure that it's not having unintended consequences? So I wouldn't say that you can't do it or that a company shouldn't do it. I think you just have to be really thoughtful, and you're going to have to, and honestly, this is where a diversity of, people who are contributing to this really helps build the models, because you need people with different backgrounds, different ages, to bring those contexts and to think. There are people who think about things I would never think about. And likewise, when I was at the law firm, I had a client who was designing something who, because they were a bunch of young engineers, I'm like, you all are missing a really big point here that's going to be important to a different generation. So I just think you have to be thoughtful about it, and you have to constantly have human testing of it to make sure that it is performing as intended.
And we'll have a deeper conversation in the second session, because we are using that as we're building software for clients. So both from a LLM as a judge, but also reinforcement learning, right? But exactly this point, you have to do it in a way that has some human part of the reinforcement learning, right? So like some testing evals and things like that.
All right, we're going to wrap up this module with great thanks to Christin for protecting the brand and protecting the reputation of Comcast, and also teaching us how to do that and what actually happens when you have to put pen to paper on these exercises. It's not theoretical, it's very, very practical in your world. So thanks, Christin. It was great to talk to you. And